Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bonsai Stuff podcast. As always, it's me, Scott Martin from Bonsai Matsu in downtown Melbourne, Australia. And thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening and for your regular patronage. It's truly appreciated, and all the comments and feedback that I get are great. I really enjoy that this little podcast provides some enjoyment for people out there, which is what it's exactly intended to do. So I want to jump into this next episode with some gusto, because this one's going to be slightly different. This came from, as from my last podcast, came from a recommendation from somebody who wrote to me and said, let's break things down. Let's see where you learnt from a bonsai and mistakes you made and things you took out of it. And that's a great idea. And I had one particular tree in mind, a big Japanese black pine that I've worked on now for 8 years, just over 8 years. And I wanted to run through the scenario of me being a bit of a young bull and where I made mistakes. So without any further ado, let's jump into it. Okay, so let me set the scene for you. It was probably midway through 2011 when I got in contact with Peter T, who was at the time an American apprentice at HN in Nagoya in Japan, and they'd put up some details about short-term apprenticeships that were available for visits over there, where you sort of immerse yourself in the culture and the family of IGN and bonsai. And it was as soon as I saw it, I jumped at it. Signed up, ended up being I think the second person around the world to have been able to secure the spot. And it got to January, February 2012 when I was in Japan living my dream. I was enthusiastic. I was a sponge, wanting to learn as much as I possibly could. I wanted to take in as much experience as I possibly could, and not be dazed by the bright lights of bonsai in Japan, but actually more focused on learning and really going in as deep as I possibly could. And it was great. It was honestly one of the most incredible life-changing experiences that I've ever had, and I'm truly grateful to everybody that was involved at the time, who it meant quite a lot to me, and it still does. I still think about it almost every single day going forward, and every time I work on a tree, lessons that I learnt over that short stay in 2012 still reflect with me to this day, and I just feel very fortunate for having been able to have done that at the time. So as my time in Japan, that first trip came to an end, I was determined and adamant that when I got back, I wanted to get into a black pine project tree that would allow me to use the skills that I'd learned. And some of the first skills I learned over there were major bending techniques for black pine. So I thought, yep, great, okay. Came back, and I think it was March in 2012, I went to one of the local bonsai nurseries, and there she was, an enormous black pine, terrible structure, next to no structure, terrible nabari. The roots were very poor. It was in a very large, a very common Chinese pot with a soil mix that looked more like garden soil than bonsai mix. But it was big, and that's what I had in the back of my mind, was that I can grab something like that with a sturdy trunk that was, sort of maybe 30 centimetres across at the base, and it stood maybe 6 foot tall, 1.8 metres tall thereabouts, and the trunk line on it sort of grew to the right hand side and kept continuing up the right hand side. And I thought, well, there's a perfect spot for me to practice some of my large bending. Didn't matter that it was thicker than my forearm. I thought, no, I've got the skills, I've been to Japan, I know what I'm doing, buy it. So bought it. As I still remember the fellow that owns the nursery turned to me and said, "That's a long-term project tree," and I said, "Yep, that's exactly what I want, is a long-term project tree." So it was ticking all of the boxes that I had in the back of my mind as I was flying home from Japan back to Melbourne late in Feb. So get the tree, all good, get it home, look at it, make a plan in the back of my mind, go through my notes from Japan, April, so maybe 2 or 3 weeks after having purchased the tree, I jump into doing the big bend. So I get the trunk protected with some rubber. I get some steel bars that's sort of the thickness of your forefinger. Tie them onto the tree with some stainless steel wire, just like I'd been taught. Try and bend this trunk. Nothing happens. So strap another steel rod on there, try and bend it. Nothing happens. The steel just starts to bend. The trunk's too determined to stay exactly where it was. So rather than stopping and coming up with a new plan, a couple of hours into this thing, it starts getting dark. I remember I had to put on the outside lights. I go into the shed and think, what can I possibly get to bend this? So I get the jack, hook up a couple of jacks, start winding, start twisting, start compressing. It's just not enough. I just can't get enough leverage on this thing to actually get it to where I want it to get to. So it's getting dark. Been out there for about 3 hours by this stage. Tree still pretty much looks the same way as what it was. Luckily, I hadn't done too much damage to the trunk. I hadn't flogged it because I'd protected it. I'd taken the time to get that part right. But then as I'm walking out of the shed, I look over to where the garden tools are and I see this enormous crowbar that's taller than the tree, and it's really thick, it's really strong. And I went, that's exactly what I need to do this bend. So I go out, get the crowbar, fix it in place, put the stainless steel on it, double wrap it, double protect the trunk, and start to bend. And I've got some real leverage with this thing, and the trunk starts to move, starts to come across, starts to tear, which is what I expected, what I'd been shown would happen, what I've experienced would happen. So I start to move this trunk over, I get it in place. About 3.5, 4 hours into the journey by this stage, I had family popping their head out and making sure that I hadn't gone insane in the backyard as I'm halfway up this black pine with a foot on the trunk, a foot on the pot, and levering this enormous crowbar over to try and bend this little bit of trunk, doing it solo, not waiting for someone to come and help me, and then trying to get guy wires in place that would actually hold it and secure it. So really a 2 or 3 person job was done by one person, stupidly, in about 4 hours of craziness. So long story short, the trunk got bent. It took the shape that I wanted. The tearing was exactly as I expected. The compression damage from the crowbar was a little bit worse than what I'd thought, but it would still be okay. I knew the strength of this tree at the time I thought was strong enough, and it would be okay, because as I looked up the trunk line of this tree, ignoring the structure that wasn't there, looking at the poor nabari, looking at the poor pot that it was in, the trunk line had taken the shape exactly as I'd pictured in my head. So secured it all up, put on the cut putty, patted myself on the back, went inside to bed. So far so good, other than being exhausted and not being as patient as what I probably should have. I'd got it done. So then, that was in April. Tree progressed, no real signs of any downfall. May, dormancy. June, winter for us, goes to sleep, nice and quiet. Looked at it and went, yep, okay. So the trunk's bent where I wanted it to be. Let's go ahead and style this thing. Let's put some shape into it. Let's put some branches into position. I was keen, I was enthusiastic, I was full of information, full of technique. So I start doing it. Tree manages to come through okay the other end. Still in the original pot, still in the poor soil, still got poor root structure. But it was okay, it was looking good, which was at that time my primary goal, was to make this thing look like what I wanted. I wanted to take big first steps for this tree. So then around about that same time, around about August, I moved house to a bigger property where I am now, where I had plans of setting up a big bonsai area, and with a bigger property comes more work, renovations, means less time for bonsais, and you can see where this is going. So my focus was in another direction as opposed to being where it should have been for this tree that I'd put a lot of time into, but I'd put a lot of pain onto as well. So I really at that point should have triggered myself to say, you know what, you need to take some care of this tree, and that's a red flag should have gone up in my head. But with the position that I was in and the very little bit of information that I knew at the time, I was, I suppose, heading down a path that I needed to hit the brick wall, and I needed to stop and reassess where things were at. And I think you can tell that this black pine was a great learning curve for me. So that was the first couple of months in this tree's life. So with the black pines, the sort of next phase after the winter dormancy is decandling in the summer months. So get out all my other black pines, everything's looking great, lots of candles everywhere, no worries, decandle. So I get this particular black pine, look at it, candles probably hadn't grown as much as what I would have expected for a big tree that had been, well fed, well loved, but they were still there. There were still needles, there were still candles, there was still an excuse to go and decandle. So I did it. So that was December 2012. So within a 6-month period, the tree had been purchased. Trunk had a massive bend put into it. It had been wired and styled, and it had been decandled. So, as I say it, it's probably a little bit too much, but let's persist with the story. Let's get on with it. So, as I said, I've moved, I was renovating, lots of work to do, had to basically gut a house and rebuild it. So not much happened when it got to the autumn-winter period for that black pine. I was honestly struggling with developing bonsai benches and stuff like that, so I really didn't have a lot of time in 2013 to be doing a lot of work with the trees, which was actually lucky for this tree. It got a bit of a rest, got a bit of a recuperation. Everything got an eye over, but I think only probably 25% of the trees, the black pines especially, got the work they needed back in 2013. Anyway, so then it gets to December, which is decandling time, 2013. Automatic pilot, there's candle growth, cut it off, get rid of it. Cool, all right. That's the plan. No need to reassess where things are at with the trunk. Thing was still green, thing was still growing, and really, it just needed to get into the process of being decandled. What I neglected to think of as well was the tree was repotted that year. So 2013, it comes out of the big Chinese pot that it's in, and it slides into another big Chinese pot that was more suited to it, and for the first time it went into a bonsai mix. Now, the bonsai mix obviously is much better for it, but when I took it out of the previous mix, I'd noticed that the roots were pretty poor, pretty non-existent. So I did get a little bit worried at that point because all this work had been done on this tree, and it probably wasn't as smart as what I'd hoped. But anyway, it had been done, it had been repotted. And in 2013 too, I went to Osaka, Kakuen, and studied there for a while as well. So I had another trip to Japan. Learned more things, came back full of beans, full of enthusiasm. But this tree only got decandled in 2013. That was repotted, and then it was decandled, and there was no further work done on the tree. 2014 rolls in. It's another year of development for all of my trees. The bonsai area has grown. A lot more work's been put into it. A lot more fixed structures been put in place. Watering systems have come in. Things are starting to settle down. And this tree is in automatic pilot mode. So winter comes around, wide, styled, cleaned up. Another trip to Japan, back to IGN in 2014. So I was distracted a little bit there as well. Then decandling comes around. Yep, cool, December, that's what we do. We decandle the pines in December. And by this stage, the trunk scarring had started to heal. And everything's looking fine. Like it looked by all accounts in 2014, as we headed into late spring, everything looked fine. The structure looked like it had set in place. It was in the program. It was in the system for looking after pines. Well fed, lots of sunlight, lots of water. Bang, What I didn't realise though was some of these things that we do to trees, to bonsai with styling and stuff like that. If there's not enough time between the incident and the next round of work that we do, it can sometimes take a long while to show the negative impacts of our processes and what we've done. So that's where 2015 kicks in, and it was a real eye-opening year for me. Again, it was another trip to Japan. I can't remember the month. It was one of them anyway. So renovations were sort of coming to a close by about that stage as well. So I had a lot more time for the bonsais. The bonsai area had grown significantly. My dream after I returned from Japan in 2015, my dream of starting a bonsai business, Bonsai Matsu, which is primarily a training school to teach people things. Fired up, I took the chance on that one and rolled the dice and got going on that. And life was looking great. And it came to winter. This black pine comes across the bench, have a look at it. Does it need a bit of a clean up? No, it doesn't really, because after decandling in 2014, there wasn't a lot of new bud growth. And I looked and went, ooh. So what was there wasn't strong. And instead of being, 2, 3, 4, 5 new candles or new buds growing from the side of decandling, there was one. And sometimes there was none. And I thought, this isn't good. So look over the tree, do the usual check, pests, is it getting enough water, root ball staying, when I'm watering, is the entire root ball getting saturated, make sure underneath there's no bugs that have got up into the pot. Is it someone else? Is it something else? Is it not me? Is it someone else? So I look at it and went, no, everything looks fine. The water uptake was slower than my other pines, which was a bit unusual as well. And I thought to myself, this tree's come on such a long way. I've got to be really mindful about what happens from here on out, and look at the tree's reserves and resources, and make sure that I protect them to get through whatever's about to happen to this tree. Like, it was a real, as I said before, it was a real red flag to me that I've gone too far. I've done too much. So 2015, wire was taken off the tree. It was put into a partly sheltered spot. It was only fed very lightly. It was monitored for the watering, so it only got watered when it needed. It wasn't constantly watered like all the other trees in the yard, all the other pines that just love to soak up the water. And when spring comes around and they start to push the buds, nothing happened. Not one bud grew on that tree in 2015. And I thought, I've killed it. This is what happens when you take for granted the knowledge that you have, and you misapply what you've learnt, and you rush. And I got that cold shiver up my spine that I'm sure everyone in bonsai's had, whether it's bending a branch and you hear the crack, or it's repotting out of season, or it's doing something too much for the tree, and then you start to see the impacts of it down the track and you go, oh no, that's what it is. You couldn't water on a super hot day, or maybe you took too much foliage off a juniper for its first styling to make it look great, and then you suddenly pay the price for it in 6-12 months' time. That was that feeling. That was when I thought, you need to learn from this. I need to go into maintenance mode for this tree, and I need to protect it. So I did. I did as much as I possibly could. I looked at this thing 2-3 times a day, every day for the whole year. 2016 comes around. So obviously there's no decambling because there's nothing growing. So, and I'd heard stories and I'd read about trees that sometimes miss growing seasons. I was back in Japan in 2016, Daiichi again. Spoke to the guys over there. They warned me about it and said, "Yep, that's a real sign of stress. So just take it really, really easy," which I did. And I'd purchased a new pot for it at the time. Brought it home in a backpack. This enormous bloody pot, which weighed a ton, but I got through customs and onto the plane because it wasn't my checked baggage, so I didn't exceed my baggage allowance with it, and I could protect it in my backpack, my large backpack that I had to get on the plane. Anyway, so 2016 comes around, and this thing had really stalled. So there was no work basically done at all in 2016. Spring comes around, and I'm just crossing my fingers that at least some of the buds start to move. We start to get warmer weather. All the other black pines start pushing. The candles start to get that little white tip on them, and they start to push out a little bit. This thing did nothing. It waited and waited and waited, and I went, oh no. So I moved it into a nice sunny position, monitored the watering, kept the food off it a little bit, started working more with diluted liquid fertilizers, and then all of a sudden, some of the candles started to open. They started to move. And I thought, whoa, it's still alive. It's still going. All the old needles look great, but you've only got 2 odd years with needles on a black pine. If it goes beyond that point, the needles fall off and there's nothing. So you need new buds. You constantly need new buds on a black pine to rejuvenate and grow. You can't just rely on old needles for the tree to photosynthesize. It's just not going to work. So 2016, these little candles come out, and then the needles start to grow, and they're all twisted. There was not one straight needle on this tree. And I thought, oh my God, this is going from bad to worse. So 2016 was a wasted year. They only extended out, maybe a couple of centimetres, an inch, if that, and the needles that grew out of them were probably less than that long. So they're only, maybe centimetre and a half long, and they're all twisted. And this thing looked like an absolute train wreck. So decandling comes around. Obviously, nothing happens with it. So by this stage, though, I'd ramped up the fertilising to put it back into the routine. Got through the summer period, the heat, and it really did look like it had stabilised. The tips of these gnarly looking twisted needles, the tips still looked okay. The new tips on the tree. So when it got to autumn, I thought, I've got to take a chance with this thing. I've got to feed it. I've got to try and increase the strength of this tree before it gets to dormancy. So I double fed it going into autumn, and it didn't really show any impact from the feeding, but it was rolling in 2017. That was the sort of start of March in 2017. It was getting heavily fed. Gets to winter of 2017. No work was done on the tree. So at this stage, it looks like there's what 2-3 years of nothing on this tree. So for me, taking all these advanced steps nice and early and pushing the tree nice and hard, or what I thought was nice and hard, turned out to be an absolute waste of time, because the tree was on that tipping point where I think it could have easily died, but it's coming back, but it's still years down the track before I've been able to do anything. So 2017, March, it's heavily fed for autumn, for fall, and it gets to winter. Winter comes around. Again, no work's done on this thing, so not one needle's been plucked for years on this thing, and the ones that are there, the newer needles, are all twisted and ugly, but it's got these nice little white tips on it. So 2017, I look at it, think, Should I repot it? No. Learn your lessons. Don't rush into this thing. Just go nice and slow. But I did it. I repotted it. This new pot that I bought back from Japan. Took it out of the pot, had a look at the roots, and the roots had improved. The roots had got a lot better than what they were. But I was so nervous about repotting this thing that I put into the new pot, did what I thought was the best. So that was in August in 2017. Did the best I possibly could. What I thought was the best I possibly could, but I rushed. And I just wanted to get this thing back in the pot and get it secured and get it onto the next phase and get through this period of unrest for the tree. So 2017, spring comes around, been repotted, started fertilising, buds start to extend, starts to look good. Bingo. New candles start to come out, start to elongate, needles start to come out. I'm holding my breath. The needles that come out are nice and straight. I've also had been regularly spraying, preventive spraying for pests and fungus and that sort of thing because the tree has been weaker. I'd stayed on top of it, and especially with those curly needles, that really flagged it to me that this tree's in a really weakened state. So I need to keep everything away from it as much as I possibly could, and successfully I'd sort of done that. So tree was repotted 2017. It started to grow, started to look okay. And comes to decandling time, no, still didn't do it in 2017. I just thought, no, let this thing just grow. 2018 comes around, no work done again. So by this stage, what's that? 4 years, 4 years, with nothing happening on this tree, bar being repotted. Comes around winter, fed heavily in autumn to get through the dormancy period. Comes out the other end. No wiring and styling done in 2018. Feed the life out of it. Starts to grow. No problems. Then I noticed there was a few areas where the growth seemed really uneven, and some branches were stronger than others. And I thought, oh, please don't drop a branch. Like, we've come so far with this thing, and I have not lost one branch with it, but I haven't taken a lot of steps forward. So 2018 was really, it was mind-boggling for me. I just didn't know what was happening to the tree. Double-checked everything, went through all the different scenarios in my head about what could be wrong with it. And I suddenly thought, I wonder if it could be the roots, because there's just inconsistencies and I just could not put my finger on what it was. So I flagged it to myself saying, when it gets to 2019, so last year, I'm gonna repot this thing. So I'll just go really, really easy with it. And I'm not going to push it too hard. I'm not going to decandle this thing, because the more it was growing and extending and elongating, the more needle mass it was getting, the stronger the tree was getting. So by this stage, I'd also noticed that there was, even though there was uneven growth, there was still backbudding further down the branches, which was great for me. That was a really good sign of the tree's health really starting to turn the corner and starting to get a lot stronger. But it's also a sign for me that I don't necessarily need to worry about letting the tree getting too long for me, because I can always cut back. I can always, if I've got those inner buds and the back budding that's strong enough, I can always reduce the length of something because I've safely got those buds behind the long growth. So everything's looking good, but it's just this uneven growth that I just couldn't put my finger on. So anyway, 2018 decandling, didn't touch it. Didn't style it, didn't do anything, didn't pluck any needles. So 2019 comes along. That's sort of, that's a long way after the tree stalled, and gets to winter, autumn, winter, when normally I'm styling the rest of my black pines. Look at this one. No, there's no chance. I put a couple of guy wires on branches just to sort of hold them in place because the tips had started to push up, but it was nothing drastic. There was nothing serious. By this stage, the scarring on the trunk from the bends healed nicely. Everything's looking good. The trunk line's beautiful. The bar is great. The bark on this tree looks really good. The branches have got back budding on them, but there's just inconsistent growth. So gets to August, which is my time for repotting my pines in Melbourne, and I popped it out of the pot, and bugging me drunk, around the back of the tree right where the nabari sort of comes into contact with the pot at a certain point, I took it out and there's a cavity that's about the size of my fist in the back of the pot. And where that cavity was, not one root had grown, and the actual roots that were in that area had died off. So after all this time and all this effort that I'd put into the tree, and all the wrong things that I'd done to the tree, because I'd rushed repotting 2 years earlier and not checked this thing for cavities, which is the very first thing I teach and very first thing we do when I get people in the workshop, is to make sure that we thoroughly work the root ball to make sure there's none of these cavities in there. And I'd done the same thing on a tree which had been flogged, which had been through hell and back. So I was actually really mad at myself in 2019. Got repotted, got fixed up, put it all back in, made sure everything was 100% with this tree, absolutely tip-top with this tree. And as soon as spring came around, it took off. So I breathed a real sigh of relief. This was only spring last year, and all the candles extended. Everything took on a really uniform shape. The candle size was really strong. The back budding had taken off by this stage as well. Everything looks good, and there was consistency throughout the tree. Like there was a vibrancy, a look to the tree that it hadn't had ever since I'd had it, and I was really, really pleased. It was it's in a super sunny position. It's getting massive air movement around it in the position it's in. It loves the water. It loves the food, and it's just back to being a black pine like every other black pine I have in my collection. It's doing exactly what it should be doing and what I'd expect it to do. The only reason it wasn't was because I was an idiot and I hadn't done what I should have done with this tree. So laying myself completely bare in front of you guys, I was an idiot. Like it's not the tree's fault that these things happen, and it never is. When a bonsai dies, I guarantee you, it's nearly 100% of the time it's us. It's what we've done to the tree at the wrong time, or the wrong process, or wrong technique, or whatever it is. But so this thing took off, and it looked fantastic. Comes to the candling time in 2019, so December last year, comes across the bench, and I looked at it and I went, you know what, I can do it, because this thing has got consistent strength across the whole tree. So I was decandled. I held my breath, but I thought, it's back in the program now. Like, this thing is looking good. I'm doing everything right for this tree, and it's starting to look great. And it followed the regimen of almost every black pine, a healthy black pine that's decandled at that time. Popped out buds, 4 or 5 buds from every site. They've all grown. Now, heading into sort of late spring now, the tree had been cleaned out and thinned out in March, April this year. No wiring needed on the tree at this stage because the guy wires are holding the branches where they want. And to be honest, I was a little bit nervous about wiring it fully as well. But it's been through spring growth, and it's shot off again. It's done exactly what I expected to. It's getting double fed. It's really powering on the growth at the moment. So this thing from the start in 2012, now in 2020, it's where it should have been back in 2015. So there's probably 5 years of development with this tree that I've lost, and I've lost it purely as a result of stupidity. That's the pure and simple thing. Technique-wise, there's a few things I would have changed in their technique-wise as to how I did it, but the main thing I would have done was I would have changed my focus. And this is the lesson, I suppose. This is where this tree has taught me so much throughout the years of having. I'm so grateful that it's still strong enough to still be here with us, because it's taught me now more than ever that it's about the strength of the tree. It's about the roots of the tree, and it's about the strength of the tree. If your focus is on anything other than those, you've lost the plot. Put your bonsai tools away, sell the pots on online and move on, because if you're focusing on styling a tree before you've worked on the health of the tree and the strength of the tree, then you've missed the complete point about longevity with bonsai. You're looking at 3 to 5 years for a bonsai if your focus is purely on styling. So now it reminds me about taking steps at the right time in the right sequence. My first thing I should have done was definitely should have bought the tree, because I loved it. There was something in it that drove me to take it. I should have, that first year, my focus should have been solely repotting the tree, working on the roots for 12 months, making sure that I can get this thing as strong as I possibly can. And when it's bursting at the seams and it's as strong as it possibly can be, that's when you do the most stressful technique to it, which was the trunk bend. And I should have done that and then left it for a year. Then the year after, if everything was okay, then it should have been styled. It shouldn't have been, purchased, bent, styled, repotted, all within a really short period of time, because it's not going to solve anything. And this thing's a testament to that fact that, you just need to do things correctly. It also taught me to be diligent with my maintenance activities, and don't just go into automatic pilot. Because it's December doesn't mean you decandle. It's the right time for decandling for me, but it doesn't mean that I should. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Is the tree prepared for it? Is it ready? Is it strong enough? Is it gonna benefit from me doing this, or is it going to go backwards? And that's the true question you need to ask yourself before you do anything. Is the tree going to take a step forward or 2 steps backwards for what I'm about to do to it? If you can't 100% say to yourself, it's going to become a better tree for doing this, then for goodness sake, don't do it. Don't push yourself and don't push the tree, and don't put yourself in the position where you stand to lose absolutely everything with that tree for that rush of blood because you've got time. Your plans on a Saturday afternoon got changed, so I'm going to go and style this tree. That's not how it works. Definitely not how it works for the tree anyway. You've got to understand the trees too, and I think that getting to know this black pine taught me so much about not only it, but every other black pine that I've ever worked on or I've ever come across. And, I think going to Japan and seeing, 3rd, 4th generation trees is very different to starting a 1st generation tree. And not all of us have that luxury where we can walk in and pick up something and continue a process. We have to start the process, and starting the process and trying to rush to that end goal is so easy to do, but it's so hard to manage. And this tree taught me that, you just need to take baby steps at the right time to do it. And you just need to make sure that you never rush. Always give it everything you've got, and always make sure that you do as much as you possibly can at every time for your trees to make sure that they get to the next level. So that's it. That's the long, hard lessons that both I've learnt and this large Japanese black pine have learnt as a consequence of my actions. It's difficult to talk about, and when I was prompted to do something like this, you lay yourself bare, and there's vulnerability there for it. But I looked at it as a real opportunity to reinforce again to myself the lessons and the learnings that you sort of profess out to people, that sometimes you need to turn around and have a good hard look in the mirror at yourself. And I've enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed it. It's taken a long time between last podcast and this podcast because I had to go back and retrace the steps of this tree via photos, and a lot of stuff's been archived and stuff like that. But it was mind-boggling to go, okay, what's the time date stamp on that photo? What's the time and date stamp on that photo? You look at them and go, wow, so I did that, then I did that, and there's only like 3 or 4 weeks in between. Now I wouldn't even think of doing something like that. But, sometimes the best lessons in life are the lessons that you learn the hard way, and that's what's happened with this one, and I'm grateful for it, and I'm far better at what I do, and my trees all round are far healthier now than when they've ever been, and that's always my focus, and it's not just for me, it's for anyone that I talk to. And if I'm on a Zoom with somebody and they're like, okay, I want to do this, want to do that, it's like, okay, so let's go back, let's talk about the health of the tree. And it's like, no, but I want to talk about styling. It's like, yeah, but let's talk about health first, and then we'll get to styling, because if your health's not right, you're going to style it and then put it into the recycle bin, because it's just not going to make it. So I think it's changed my entire focus on everything, and there's been other trees that I've done the wrong thing with, and other trees, some trees that have died along the way, and every one of them is an opportunity for me to learn and get better at what I do, and to master my craft, and this black pine has been fantastic, and I am absolutely 100% certain that this one is going to be a tree that stays with me for my entire life, and it's going to be one that hopefully passes down generational through my family in some shape or another, and it's going to be a legacy tree, because it means a lot. I think it'll be a magnificent tree one day. Like, it's really got the bones of being something really fantastic, but it's more what it's given back to me, and the guidance it's offered to me, and the strength, the pure strength that this thing's got to survive what it's been through, as a reminder to me to make sure that I always do the best I possibly can. So that's the podcast out as raw as it can possibly be. I hope you've enjoyed it. There's no on the bench or anything like that this week. I thought this one would drag on a little bit more than what it probably should have, and it has. So thank you for sticking around, and thanks for listening in. Please stay in touch. I hope this has helped prove that everybody in the bonsai world has the same experience at some point or another, and that we all share a common passion of love for these little trees, and we really should do everything we possibly can, more so now and going forward than ever, to protect their longevity, and that should always be your focus. Beautiful trees are great, but living trees are much nicer than dead ones. So please stay in touch by any of the socials: Facebook, Instagram, website bonsaimatsu.com, email scott@bonsaimatsu.com. Anything. I'm more than happy to hear from you guys, and I look forward to getting back in touch, and the what's on the bench will be in the next podcast. And I wish you all the very best. Everybody, take care at this time. It's an awkward time around the world, but I'm certain that with unity and common focus, we will get there. So take care. Thank you very much, and I'll catch you next time. Until then, happy bonsai.